Hello and welcome. I am Lian Buan and this is Rappler Talk. Today we're going to talk about the quo warranto petition that is filed against Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno. Tomorrow on Friday, the SC will hold a special en-banc session to vote on the quo warranto petition. And to talk about that and scenarios that will possibly result from the voting, we are talking with Professor Dan Gatmaytan, who teaches constitutional law at the University of the Philippines. Sir, good morning.
Good morning.
Sir, first of all, my first question, what is your stand on the quo warranto petition? Is it unconstitutional? Is it extra-constitutional to your view?
I think it's unconstitutional because as every first-year law student knows, there is only one way to remove the Chief Justice, and that is by impeachment and trial in the Senate. And the quo warranto petition, even if it was available as a remedy, can only be filed a year after the public official has assumed office. So even if it was one of the viable options, it's way too late to be used by anyone.
Sir, did you expect, when it was first filed or when it was just being talked about, did you expect that it would get this far?
No, because I figured the Solicitor General would know better than to file this case because it is technically not available as a remedy.
Sir, did you expect that it was gonna get this far at the Supreme Court?
No, I did not, because I thought the Supreme Court should have dismissed the petition outright. And even if it entertained the petition, I thought that they were giving the Soldier an opportunity to explain why they should receive the petition or grant it, but then following law and jurisprudence, they should have dismissed it.
Sir, tomorrow, so a lot of news reports are saying that it's a done deal, it says on a broadsheet. Let's just assume that it's going to be a majority vote to oust the Chief Justice. What can she do after she's ousted?
Well, the Chief Justice can either accept the ruling of the majority and leave the Supreme Court, or file another leave, as others have suggested, and come back when the time allows her to do so.
Sir, when you say come back when the time allows her to do so?
I think the premise is that the Supreme Court can always review its decisions, and there's this possibility that they can reverse a decision granting the quo warranto petition at some future point.
Sir, if she's ousted, she can immediately file a motion for reconsideration?
She can file a motion for reconsideration. But if she has no new argument, then typically the Supreme Court will dismiss it.
If her MR is dismissed, then that's the time that it's immediately final and executory.
Yes.
Sir, yung voting or yung results sa bukas, pwede ba siyang maging immediately executory but not final? May possibility bang immediately executory?
I think sa rules, there are very few cases that are immediately executory. I think if she files a motion for reconsideration, then she's still the Chief Justice. But it's not going to be a long time. Yeah.
I'm asking about the MR because I think it's 15 days, sir, to file right normally. I'm asking because there's an interesting timeline to that. May 15, the House will resume its session. So people are saying that the House can actually impeach, while the MR is pending, the House can impeach her and transmit the articles of impeachment to the Senate, and then the Senate will have, I guess, jurisdiction over the impeachment process. Are you looking at scenarios like that, sir?
I think the Senate has, Congress, both houses, has jurisdiction over the issue. And if it wanted to, it can assert that jurisdiction by challenging what the Supreme Court is doing now. And I don't understand what they're waiting for.
The premise is that the House leadership does not want to contest the quo warranto petition. They were vocal about that. They said that whatever the Supreme Court wants to do, it will let it do it. And I think that's what Senate President Coco Pimentel is trying to urge the House to. What are you waiting for? If you resume, you should vote. I'm asking because when the MR is denied and the impeachment is still at the House, would Senator Pimentel have basis to say, hey, the Senate has jurisdiction over the impeachment process?
The Senate cannot compel the House to impeach the Chief Justice. But what I'm saying is, because the Constitution gives them the sole power to remove the Chief Justice, they have personality now to challenge what is happening in the Supreme Court.
Even if the articles of impeachment have not been transmitted to the Senate.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I know the members of Congress are saying we can't do anything because she hasn't been impeached yet. But what's going on right now is undermining the functions of both houses of Congress, and that would give them, I think, the personality to challenge what the court is doing.
Sir, how is that going to look like? Where are they going to go to challenge the quo warranto petition?
The Supreme Court itself. I think Senator Trillanes was entertaining that possibility, that you can file a case to stop it because under the Constitution, the Senate can remove the Chief Justice and nobody else.
I think Senator Trillanes and Senator De Lima tried to file an intervention. But what is that petition going to look like, sir? Because intervention, I think the intervention of the IBP has been denied. It wasn't permitted to file an intervention. If they're going to file, what is that petition called?
They would ask for the dismissal of the quo warranto case. But they would have a stronger case because they're the party in interest, because it is their function to do what the Supreme Court is trying to do. So the IBP, it's always hard for them to justify their personality, because sometimes they say, we're here to make sure the law is followed. That doesn't always work with the Supreme Court, especially in a case like this. But if the Senate does it, and even the House does it, then they would have to listen.
So, sir, if she's ousted, pwede siyang petition for certiorari to overturn an SC decision? Pwede bang ganun?
No, because you don't file a petition for certiorari against the Supreme Court.
So,
That's why they should have tried to stop it now.
So, will they lose a chance after Friday?
They might, yeah.
So, time is ticking for anybody of them to...
There are other things that can happen. Let's say, it's unlikely, but let's say whatever decision the court comes up with tomorrow, Congress decides to impeach the Chief Justice. Yes. That can still happen. In other words, independently of what the court did, Congress can say, wait a minute, this is our job, and we're going to impeach her and then try her, and they might have a different result.
And what will that look like for the country, sir, if the legislative and the judiciary clashes?
Well, that's what you call a crisis. It won't look good, but it wouldn't be the first time, because lately we've been seeing a lot of that.
Yes, as you said, sir, lately we've been seeing a lot of that, but the issues just dissipate over time. I mean, to recall the issue of the detention of the Ilocos officials, it just faded away until the House decided to release them on their own initiative. So, an issue as big as this, it involves the Chief Justice. How long or how far do you think the clash will go?
Oh, I don't know. But I think what's important is to note that when these things happen, when the Congress, for example, ignores the judiciary, it comes at a time when the court itself plays or is perceived to be playing politics. For example, the case of Marinduque's Representative Regina Reyes, when the House thought that the court was trying to settle the issue before the House Electoral Tribunal could assume jurisdiction, they refused to follow the court's ruling to the end. The court said it's final. Reyes is an American citizen, therefore she's not qualified. The House said we don't care.
How did that end, sir?
That the winning candidate had to file a separate case for the Speaker of the House to recognize him, which they didn't do until the term ended. See, so that's new. I mean, if the Supreme Court is healthy and it makes a pronouncement, even if you don't like it, you follow. Yes. That's a good sign. That means there's a respect for the branches of government. When the other branches of government, as it is now doing, ignoring the Supreme Court, that's a bad sign. That means that the courts are not equal. That means that while in theory they should be co-equal, they are actually regarding the Supreme Court as a lesser of a branch, and therefore they're calling it names now. It's something that would not have happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
Sir, we're talking about all these scenarios, what can happen, what can a branch do, but I think the legal profession would agree the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of the law. So whatever it says it's final. So would you say that it puts a lot of pressure on the Chief Justice that this is all on her court now? So if she wants to avoid crisis, if she's ousted, she should just step down.
If we don't want to avoid a crisis, then the Supreme Court should follow the law,
Which is to dismiss.
which is to dismiss the quo warranto case. I disagree that it's on Sereno's, that Sereno has the ball. The first thing that can happen is for the court to do the right thing and then dismiss the case. And if there really is an issue regarding the Chief Justice, then it should be thrashed out, in the impeachment process and the trial.
To talk more about scenarios, sir, we were talking earlier about this doctrine called pro hac vice. To explain to the viewers, it is a scenario in which the Supreme Court will grant the petition and oust Chief Justice Sereno, but they will limit their pronouncement. Can you care to explain, sir?
Sometimes the Supreme Court can limit the impact of their ruling by saying it applies only to a particular case. So it will apply only to this case. And no one else is allowed to cite it. So that fear that people are talking about now about going after every official with a defective silent or defect in the appointment may not happen if the court says it doesn't apply to anybody else. But there is some dissent about the proper use of pro hac vice. Some justices are saying it violates the equal protection of the law because it limits the effect of a ruling to certain parties and not to everyone. So it's a doctrine that's sometimes used, but not acceptable to everyone.
Sir, assuming that they do come out with the ruling invoking pro hac vice, that's gonna say that this case is peculiar to the Chief Justice's situation, therefore the quo warranto only applies to her. Is it gonna look like
They
that?
will say probably we've never had a situation like this where the appointee wasn't even qualified, and therefore there are peculiar circumstances in this case that will limit its application only to the Chief Justice.
Sir, what if the pro hac vice is invoked only by a separate concurring opinion and not in the main?
Then it has no effect. It has to be a holding of the majority.
So if it's just a concurring opinion of a justice, we can consider quo warranto like an option for everybody.
Yes.
Sir, based on jurisprudence, has pro hac vice been invoked before or in any high-profile case that we know of?
I know it was mentioned in the Torre de Manila case, and that's the case where some of the justices, the dissenting justices, started to object to the use, because it does paint a picture of selective application of the law.
Sir, if Sereno is ousted on Friday and she doesn't recognize the decision, would you have constitutional basis to ignore the decision of the court?
She would have a constitutional basis because she would say she wasn't removed according to the provisions of the Constitution. But on a practical level, she probably won't do that because you have the legal profession, as you said earlier, will follow the Supreme Court majority's ruling, even if it is wrong. And in that case, I'm sure the procedure for selecting a new Chief Justice will be triggered, and then you will have a bigger crisis with two Chief Justices or Chief Justice.
Sir, with all the contesting and clashing opinion of or actions, contention towards the court, would you say that this is the gravest so far that you've witnessed recently? I consulted you before in the story about the suspension of the Deputy Ombudsman when there's a Supreme Court ruling that says the President cannot suspend. Out of all those decisions, actions under this administration, would you say that this is the gravest so far?
Yes, I think this hasn't happened since '73, when Marcos tried to amend the Constitution in violation of the provisions of the Constitution, and the Supreme Court said it's okay because it's a political question. And when the court does that, when the court plays politics, it diminishes its stature and it weakens as an institution. And the court has never recovered its stature from that time, because before '73, its reputation was almost pristine. You can talk, say bad things about every branch of government, but not as our Supreme Court. And when they started doing that, ignoring what the law says for a political outcome, so we can have a new constitution, it diminishes itself. And I think that's what the court is walking into right now. If we have learned the lessons of the past, then they should know, they should be aware that they are strongest when they follow the law. And when they follow the law, they have the public support. That's how the system works. So no one messes with them because that's where they draw strength.
Sir, is it notable that many of the justices right now who are sitting are going to retire soon, so there's going to be a fresh new batch of justices, so maybe we can see a fresh perspective and let go of this fear that they're walking back into that kind of...
There's always that possibility, but that it all depends on who is appointed to the Supreme Court. A new justice doesn't mean a new perspective.
Sir, maybe this is imagining too much, no? But what if Chief Justice doesn't leave the Supreme Court and says, I am the Chief Justice, I will not leave my office? Will the JBC still proceed with the search for a new justice?
That's not a smart political move because she will eventually appear as a nuisance more than anything else. And they will carry on the selection of the new Chief Justice. And then you have a problem because there will be two of them. Morally, she will be correct, I think. Legally, she might even be. But on a practical level, it might not be smart to hold the fort.
Sabi nga, sir, we always talk about this at this point in time. Maybe she can come back at some point in time. At some point in time, sir, may possibility ba that maybe the Solicitor General could be held accountable for the co-warranto petition that he filed? If
the court determines later on that it should not have been filed to begin with. It should have been dismissed, and they reverse it. Yes, but there are a lot of ifs there. Yes. Right now, the fact that the court entertained it and let's say it is granted tomorrow means the Solgen can relax, because if he had done something wrong, then they would have thrown out his case right from the very start.
Sir, the possibility of a future reversal, who has the personality to seek the reversal? The Chief Justice also?
Yes, I think so. Let's say the composition of the court has changed to an extent that a different decision is possible. She might want to.
It kind of paints a picture of a very subjective justice system, that you have to wait for other justices to leave for your position to be recognized.
That's a reality that students of law find out very quickly. It's not objective. In other words, when you have a problem, it's never black and white. Or else you wouldn't need 15 people to decide what the law is.
Sir, given all the past decisions of the Supreme Court, I mean, they upheld martial law, they allowed the heroes' burial. What will a co-warranto ouster mean for the reputation of the Supreme Court or public trust even on the Supreme Court?
I don't think it's going to do the court any good, considering that say the IBP has expressed doubts on the validity or legality of this petition. I think if the court removes the Chief Justice tomorrow, then it'll only weaken their position vis-a-vis the other branches of government. I think it's just a bad move.
Sir, while we're on the topic of objectivity and subjectivity, let's say the Chief Justice survives this co-warranto petition. In the course of her battle, many people, many entities have supported her, have come out to her support. Wouldn't that put her in an awkward situation, because it may seem like she owes a lot of people some favor, because they supported her well?
Well, I don't know. Knowing her, I don't know. I don't think she's the kind who thinks she owes anyone. And I think the ones who are expressing their support are not doing it because they want something in return in the future. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Sir, any last thoughts on what might happen tomorrow? What is your hope personally? What would happen?
For the judiciary and for the country, then the petition should be denied. That's the right thing to do. And if they have an issue with the Chief Justice, then we should follow what the Constitution says and let Congress deal with that problem.
All right. Thank you, sir, for that very interesting talk. That has been Professor Dan Gatmaytan, a constitutional law professor at the University of the Philippines. This is Lian Buan. Thank you for watching.